Well, I wasn't expecting it to snow overnight since it's March, and my Sainsbury's delivery has been cancelled, so that's completely ruined my plans for this weekend. And I've got a cold. Things are not going well. I was going to have some downtime, do a lot of videoing, but everything is turned upside down. I'll have to go out and get food at some point, which I don't really want to do. So I think we'll cheer ourselves up with a bit of a book haul. So things are not going well. Everything is upside down. It was going to be an Apollonian time this weekend. I've got 3 days off, a day in work, then another 2 days off. The video is away, which means space, calm, and an ability to shoot loads of videos without sort of interfering with our plans. I've got a million things to do anyway, which do not involve this channel, so I've got those to do as well. And yeah, so my shopping's not coming, so I'm really fed up. So I've got to waste time going out tomorrow morning to get some food in here because they can't deliver for another 36 hours. And, you know, it's just circumstance, but it's just one thing after another in life, isn't it? This is what happens. But anyway, we'll cheer ourselves up with a book haul, as we say. Now, to you, subjective time is probably only about 3 days since you saw the last book haul. And as I start filming this, the Saturday morning video has just popped up. And that's fundamentally a collector diary with some reviews and some book haul stuff. So this is a combination vlog and book haul. So this is going out before the more perfectly formed things, which I was going to sort of film at the moment. But I've got an urge to get all these things out of the way because, you know, when they're out of the way, then I can focus on doing something thematic. And I say loads of plans, but it's taking a while to get to them because circumstances keep upsetting the apple cart. Now, what can you see here? You can see here Robert Graves, The Golden Fleece, Penguin Modern Classic, very nice plain livery. Why is it so plain, you ask yourself? Well, it's actually print on demand, but for a print on demand book, this is really high quality. Now, I'm a big Graves fan, never read this, it's been out of print for a million years. So, of course, it's Jason and the Argonauts. I'm looking forward to reading that because I haven't read any Graves for a long time. And I love Claudius the God, and his Greek myths book, which has been in my library since I was about 16 and is the only thing you need. Never mind, you know, Neil Gaiman or Stephen Fry or any of these celebrity writers. All you need is proper classical students like Graves. And in the background there, you could see Hunter's Moon by Gary Kilworth, which I thought I'd dig out because I've talked about Gary a lot on the channel, and that's his first anthropomorphic fantasy novel. So I'll pop that there because it is germane to something I'm going to talk to later on. Now, you will have to bear with me because I may cough and splutter throughout this. I'll try and edit it all out because I shouldn't really be speaking at all because I've got a dreadful cold. My blood pressure is sky high the last 2 weeks, and yes, I still got polymyalgia, but there you go. Enough of me complaining, more onto the books. So yeah, so that'd be great fun. I'm sure you, like me, love Jason and the Argonauts. And I have, this is a slightly different setup because I've got rather bored with presenting in the same places in the same way. So this is a hybrid thing of the old table and the lounge. And just to get the height right, I'll have the books on top of a copy of William Morris's News from Nowhere, his utopian SF novel. And of course, Morris's credo is very much the things which should be beautiful and useful. I think you'll agree that's very beautiful, so it's actually being very useful as well. So enough of this banter and on with stuff. So I have some things here I picked up since last few weeks really, and I mostly got these in the post, one or two in the wild, and this is something I didn't show. A little while ago, the video widow and I went to a little bookshop in Bath, and just it was the day after we'd watched Jules Burt's video about his Puffin story books from the 60s and 70s, and the video widow bought this, The Midnight Folk by John Masefield. Very beautiful, I think you'd agree. And yeah, I am thinking of getting into Puffins a bit, to be honest. So yeah, so she bought that, but I'll have a little sort of look at it as well. So there you go. And of course, it's in the glorious A format, which we love. But today we're going to do a lot of A format because it's going to be the joy of DAW and other stories. So we'll come on to that. And interestingly, as we're in an A format mood, there's not much A format available now, which really gives me that great pain. But there is this series, which is one of the Penguin Essentials. And Penguin Essentials is a list of about, I think there's about between 40 and 60 titles, and they're all fairly sort of classic things. They're books which have stood the test of time. And as you can see, this is Gerald Durrell's My Family and Other Animals, which is a typical one. And they do a little bit of SF, not as much as I'd like. They do The Wanting Seed by Anthony Burgess, and they do a couple of other things, one of which I'm going to show you in a moment. But this is an interesting book because it's always been in print. There's a B format edition as well. And it's really well written and it's great fun, but it lacks that compelling quality for me. So I've only got sort of so far through it. But a very beautiful book, I think you'll agree. Isn't that lovely? Bring back the A format, everybody. That's what we want. So, more germane to this channel's primary interest is speculative fiction, SF, sci-fi, science fiction, structural fabulation. And here we have, as you see, The Day of the Triffids in Penguin Essentials. Now that, I think you'll agree, is a really, really colourful cover. Look at that, isn't that amazing? So there we go. And I picked that up because I had some credit on my loyalty card at work, and on the back there it shows also they do Clockwork Orange. They do an edition of The Chrysalids, which is horrible, quite frankly. It's a shame. I really hate it. It's got a horrible cover, but I really like this, so I bought that. And you can never have too many copies of John Wyndham, really, can you? Can you? Not really. I think this is my 5th copy of Triffids currently. I've had other ones as well, you know, but it is a keynote book, so I think we can get away with it. And it's A format, and you've got to support the A format by buying it whenever you can. So there's that there, and obviously we've all read it. But again, like every edition pretty much, it goes on about a freak cosmic event. It's not a freak cosmic event. You read the text closely. It's a satellite weapon. That's the thing. Wyndham didn't just have one novum, the Triffids, genetic engineering. He also had satellite weapons. So there you go. Genius. Nobody ever talks about that. It's because they don't close read the text. Close read the text. Now what the blurb says, blurbs are often inaccurate, you'll find. Close read the text. So there we go. So what else do we have? So A format, and we are going to come on to the joy of DAW, but there's lots of other things. So when I was down at Dorset Bob's recently, of course, I bought some things, as you saw in the video, the immense fantasy and horror unboxing. So I bought some other stuff and some things which I got from him. This is a series where I had one of them, I saw another one, and I thought, do I really want to go there? Because this is by somebody who had a large amount of pseudonyms early in their career, somebody who I like a lot. But I thought, am I really going to get into the pseudonymous stuff which was written for money? And I thought, to a degree, maybe, because some of it wasn't genre fiction, some of it was TV tie-ins. And we're talking about the very wonderful Robert Holdstock. And this here is Shadow of the Wolf, under the byline Chris Carlson. And as you see, that chap there, he's exceptionally muscle-bound. I mean, they didn't have steroids in those days, or perhaps it wasn't those days. Perhaps it's another space and time, not the past. And yeah, but I thought Chris Carlson, one of his pseudonyms, and this is one of his routine sword and sorcery things, and a savage new fantasy series, Berserker. So there you go. So I'll read those for a laugh at one point because they're short and sharp and fleet, and that'd be great because I've not read these. So Robert, I mentioned him in the Faber Mafia video. I've talked about him in other contexts as well, especially folk horror. So yeah, so I thought I'd go for those because Bob had those, really nice, and he's backed them. He's even boarded them. It's like comic book land, you know. Will I leave the boards in? I probably not, but it's really nice. The boards are handy if you've got something which is a little bit bowed and sort of tight bagging, but that might help a bit. So we'll see what we can do. It's rather Bob Fleming, isn't it? So then we have The Bull Chief. I actually had a copy of this, which I bought in Hay. Then I decided that I was going to pass it on because I didn't want to sort of recollect the series and I needed space. So I got rid of it. But as I saw all three at Bob's, they're in great nick and a reasonable price. So there we are. So that's The Bull Chief. Lovely. And here's the third volume, The Horned Warrior. And I think there were only 3 of these. So this is going to be interesting because Robert never did full-blown, straight-ahead traditional sword and sorcery under his own name, under his own byline, only under these pseudonymous things. He did other things like this as well. He had loads of pseudonyms, very busy chap. And yeah, you know, this is what the jobbing writer used to do, you know, and it's still not unknown today, but we're not going to reveal who we're talking about. So there you go. So very, very nice, I think you'll agree. Proper sword and sorcery. And if you go to the paperback fair in London late in March, which Jules, Bert and I have mentioned a few times, which I'm planning to be at, though my current state of health, I'll probably pass away before then, the way it's going. Let's hope not. And, you know, I think there'll be a fair amount of fantasy there. So speaking of which, I just had to buy this. And it's not really fantasy, it's SF, but it has the look and the feel of fantasy. And yes, we're on to the door. This is Daria of the Bronze Age with a Josh Kirby jacket. Look at that. Stunning, straight yellow spine. I've kept this in the bag. I haven't unbagged it or anything yet. I haven't looked at any detail. And this is about Eric Carstairs of Xanthodon. Now, Lynn Carter, not the finest prose stylist in the world, much reviled by many Conan fans, because he was a person who collaborated a lot with Lynn Spragler-Camp, who's a superior writer, in expanding and revising, you know, unfinished texts and little short stories by Howard, which is how we end up with millions of Conan books in the 70s. And they were like everywhere then. And of course now they're mostly really collectible and out of print. So this is about sort of a underground land under the Sahara. So it's very sort of Verne, Edgar Rice Burroughs, but I just love that cover. And Kirby, you know, I really like Kirby. He's great. I used to think he was silly, and he is silly, but you know, he's original. There's nobody else like him, so I think you'd agree that's fantastic. Daria of the Bronze Age. There is another one in this series which I'd really like, which has got a great cover. I can't think what it's called, and I think I might try and pick that up soon. So there we go. So The Joy of DAW. Donald A. Wollheim, an early fan, and I have been quite disparaging about DAW in terms of their literary quality, and I won't hold back from that. I think a lot of it is routine stuff, but at the same time, you're talking about commercial publishing, so that's always been there. It's always been there. It's always going to be there. It supports the industry. It supports more literary writers. It supports bookshops and booksellers, which is a good thing for me. So it's always there, but critically, I have been down on DAW. But there are lots of good things, and in terms of the iconography and the charm and the nostalgia collecting, you just can't go wrong. And I've said several times on the channel that I'll never forget going into, I think it was Fantasy Inn on Charing Cross Road in central London, and there was a sea of yellow spines, and you'd see them in the special shops around the UK, like in Forever People in Bristol. And another thing that nobody talks about is that, of course, back in the 70s, I mean, my first trip to London was very early 80s. And of course, Soho then was full of pawn shops, quite frankly. And there's all sorts of naughty things going on. And it's cleaned up quite a lot now, as far as I could tell. And there'd be lots of shops which just said bookshop. And you'd go in and there would be literally stacks. There would be stacks of A format paperbacks. And I mean stacks that high everywhere. And you think, gosh, this is a bit disorganized. And they were all really cheap. But then you realize that there was a little doorway or stairs down to a basement, and of course that's where they kept the naughty magazines. So you'd sort of wander in these bookshops and you know, you wouldn't twig straight away. So a lot of these things were bought in huge quantities, so they were all out there. There's all sorts of sort of pulp paperbacks, remainders and what have you. So my only regret is that I didn't really spend much time in those shops and looking at those things and picking those things up. So that's something, and it's all gone now. It's very sad, you know. It's a great shame, because you know, you'd also find that some of these places which were naughty bookshops, under the counter stuff in the basement, on the ground floor would be really good remainder shops and art bookshops and things like that, and that's sadly completely gone, you know. So it's a great shame. So it was a very rich time to be alive, and I always wish I was a bit older, in fact, to be quite honest, because I'd have enjoyed that stuff more. But anyway, Daria of the Bronze Age in DAW. Lovely. So let's have some more DAW. And Mordor. Let's have some Mordor. It feels like Mordor in my chest this morning. That's the fact of it. So Michael Coney, Mirror Image. Now there is a Michael Coney video coming up because he is neglected. I did have a copy of this edition and I gave it to my friend Nick, and I missed it, and Bob had one. I thought, well, I'll have that. And do I regret giving it away? No, I never regret giving books to friends, because you're sharing the love. You know, you're sharing, you know, and I've got a Gollancz hardcover. And this is great. This is the first in the Amorph series. He wrote 3 or 4 of these, and they're a loose series. And it's about a planet where mankind has gone to exploit the resources. And there are these beings called Amorphs, and they can change their shape. And they have this particular thing where they can read your consciousness and read your mind, and they assume a shape that will please you. So there's a very similar thing in that respect to the way that the ocean in Solaris conjures up Chris Kelvin's wife. You know, it's his dead wife. So it's like, but isn't that fantastic? And great book. I'll talk about Michael Coney again. If you haven't read him, I really recommend him. Beautiful, beautiful writing, very pastoral and gentle. An awful lot about love and romance. I've said this before, I know. I hope to go a bit more in depth when I do a career overview. But yeah, his stuff's absolutely lovely. I haven't read his latest stuff, which looks like fantasy. and I was put off by that for a while, so I'll get around to that at some stage, but I'll give you a good overview of sort of all the sort of early stuff. So yeah, lovely stuff. So that's one worth watching out for, Mirror Image. And, you know, these are things that I saw at Bob's, and some which you would have seen in that unboxing video, and I thought, I can't leave that there, you know, I really can't. So I, you know, got on the old email and said, Bob, send me some books, please, dear boy. And he did, which is very true. He's a charming man. And I know some of you guys have placed orders as well. So he's very, very pleased with that. So thanks from Bob via me to you guys. And I decided to pick up this, Joe Clayton, Ghost Hunt, Novel of the Diadem. And I've often thought of picking up Clayton, and she gets compared to Lee Brackett, which isn't a bad thing. Lee Brackett, she's the greatest. And these are late 70s, early 80s, and they do have quite the sort of fantasy feel of them. And this raises the whole question, which we must address at some point when I've thought about it in more depth and have codified my thinking about why female SF writers tend to switch the gear towards the orbit of fantasy. And they do that quite a bit. And it is a marking sort of factor, and it is a gender differentiation thing. I know we're not supposed to be different. We're in this paradoxical time when we can be different, but we can't at the same time. But I don't really care about that. So, you know, I'll give this a go at some point and talk about it. This is about the 4th, 5th of the series. I don't think I'm going to collect them all, but I do get drawn to them because they're very pretty and they're DAW. So they are naturally very pretty. So there you go. And they have these fetching ladies on the jackets. Don't worry, it doesn't mean I'm about to start collecting Marion Zimmer Bradley. I'm leaving that to Jill's. Though again, when I've been tempted, but when you've actually read her, oh well, it's not exactly sterling stuff, is it? It's not sterling stuff, not in my view anyway. So, Mordor, Mordor again, and we have even more. Here's another Michael Coney, and this is probably one of his most celebrated books. This is Rax, in the UK called Hello Summer Goodbye. And I talk about this in my SF to read in the summertime video, which I hope you watch, as I shot that in my friend's garden. It's a lovely video, it's great, even if I say so myself. And it was also known as the Palahaxi Tide. He wrote a sequel, which was never published until he died, called I Remember Palahaxi. And again, very gentle love story set on an alien planet. The planet's, how can I put it, biosphere is affected by sort of a double star system, and the beings in this are humanoid but not human, if you see what I mean. So that's interesting, because a science fiction writer I know has a book coming out later this year, a debut novel in which there are no human characters, they're all alien, and this is rather like that as well. But you read it and you think, you know, he's just really writing about people, and it's lovely stuff. Really great book. I really recommend that. That's a good first Coney, as is Mirror Image. So either of those make really good first Conies for you to pick up and try if you like. This is relatively common. If you can get the Pan Lozenge, Hello Summer Goodbye, what a title. That's the one to go for. But, you know, so I've got, how many copies? I've got the hardcover, I've got the Pan Lozenge. I've got 3 copies of it. Insane, isn't it? So let's have some more. Now, the next one is a rare one. Now, somebody else in the little sort of BookTube SF community picked one of these up recently. Was it Matt at Bookbuild? It might have been. But anyway, somebody picked it up, and this one is very uncommon and is pretty expensive if you can find it. Now, of course, Bob does me a deal because he's the man, and also Bob is a conditioned guy like me, so we're laughing. This is the Strugatsky Brothers. Monday Begins on Saturday, and I think you'll agree that's fairly spectacular. Now, Monday Begins on Saturday is also available as a Gollancz masterwork. I have read it. I didn't entirely get on with it. I do intend to go back to it, and it has fantastic elements. And on the back it says, behind the scenes at the secret Soviet Institute of Witchcraft and Black Magic. So this is one of those science fantasy things where the line between magic and science, they're trying to sort of rub that out and claim magic for science. And this comes very much into that Russian thing where the Russians, and this is from the birth of SF in Russia, had this tendency to merge fabulation, fable-like fantasy forms with the emergence of SF. And you see it in things like Bulgakov, The Fatal Eggs. You see it in all sorts of things. And very often, even, you know, Lem would go into that as well. And Lem, of course, was Polish. So it is an East European, Slavic, Eurasian thing where there's this melding of the more sort of folk forms with with actual SF, and there's a guy called Sorokin who does this as well, and I'll talk about him on the channel at some point. So I find that form of Soviet SF, it's a bit sort of rollicking and Rabelaisian, and it doesn't always grab me in the same way. I like the purer stuff, I have to say, but it does have its merits, and it does have wider connections to Russian folk culture, so it is interesting. If you find one of these, it'll cost you between 30 and 50 pounds, and I think there are maybe 2 on eBay at the moment, but I'd say there's a Golanx Masterwork which you can comfortably get, which has a good cover actually. So there you go, that's an uncommon DAW there, one for the collectors. As one of the websites often says, is it Durdles who say that? They often say that. If you look at Durdles' website, their books, the descriptions often say, feels lightly read, and one for the collectors, that's their jam. Can we do any more DAW? Yes, we can. As soon as I say it, I just keep thinking of Ian McKellen and all that stuff. Now, you'd have seen me wax lyrical, and I think it was in Jules's video. So if you haven't watched his Jules's video of me at Bob's, me and him and Bob at Bob's, do. And I really got taken with this because of his title, because his title is so good. And this is an author I know very little about. I've looked them up, but you know, I can't really say a heck of a lot. This is Manning Norville, and this is one of Odin the half god. Odin sounds like Odin, Woden, doesn't it? And this is Wetted Bronze. Now, that's what you want from Sword and Sorcery. Wetted Bronze. That's a title. Oh, that title alone sold it to me. Now, when Joe Abercrombie first appeared, Joe Abercrombie's books, his first Law trilogy was pretty much the last fantasy trilogy I read all the way through. And I stopped them because I knew it would go on and on and on and on, and there would be subsequent volumes. And it was good, you know. And he did this great thing where he introduced you to the characters individually, and then he showed you those characters through the other character's eyes, so you got a different take on it, and that was really good. That was probably his best literary virtue, and he is funny, maybe a little bit too sure of himself, but the thing with his books is that they had really good titles. The Blade itself, that's not a bad title. Then he chose a Heinrich Heine quotation for the title of the second volume, which is Before They Are Hanged, which is fantastic. Why aren't more fantasy novels? If they're supposedly so imaginative, why have they got such dull titles? The House of This, The Throne of That. Oh, come on. And then, of course, the third volume was The Last Argument of Kings, which, again, is a great title, you know. Don't think of the trouble with peace. Well done, Joe. You know, even though I'm disparaging in some ways of his writing, you know, it's a little bit too cocksure, I think, sometimes, and a little bit smug. But, you know, maybe that's just my reading of it. But Wetted Bronze. This is the thing. I've nothing against fantasy. I've nothing against traditional forms. If the authors could get hold of it again and could sort of bring some sort of aesthetic structure back into it and say to publishers, no, I've done a trilogy, that's it. I've done a diptych, that's it. I'm doing a singleton this time, resting the control. But no, we have this endless thing. We have these bloated sagas. We have these dull titles and this dull prose and characters who speak as if they've just come out of somewhere in Neasden or, you know, a bath even, you know, and it's just dull. But yeah, Wetted Bronze. So that'll go on the massive to be read pile, and I'm sure it'll be fun. And this is an idea where this be before the Mediterranean, so it'll be fun. Astronauts from space who dominated their sky with their chariots ruled barbaric humanity. Ah, so it's actually SF. Good stuff. Right, so there we go. Wetted Bronze. We do like things to refer to actual metals in our Sword and Sorcery, as you see. Now, we've got one more DAW and then a plethora of other beauties here to show you. So this, again, is something you would have seen in the video. This is Tanith Lee, Day by Night. Not a Lee I know, it's one of the thicker ones. Really, really nice. And this is one of those things where you have a planet which has one side facing the sun and the other is in darkness perpetually because it doesn't have a rotational orbit. Let's have a look. What year is this from? 1980. There we go. Very, very nice. And yeah, just the cover alone. So what is my feeling on collecting DAW? Well, I've always thought I'll stick to things which I know are good and things which I don't know which look interesting. But I am being drawn more into picking them up just because they're lovely, especially if they're good nick. When I've got a lot more, I mean, Jules is trying to collect them all and he's doing a great job and they look fantastic. So if you haven't watched Jules's DAW videos, so search Jules Burt DAW and you see some lovely ones, really, really nice. And it's always fun watching Jules as well. But I think you'd agree that's very, very beautiful. I couldn't resist that really. So that goes on there. You will have seen me review a Tanith Lee in a video recently, and I am going to reread some more Tanith stuff because it's been ages, and I have been thinking, do I want to expand my sort of collection? And I nearly bought the Birthgrave series off Bob. He had them signed, but they were a little bit, I mean, you know, her stuff is really collectible, and I wouldn't say they were expensive. The prices were good. For the whole trilogy, I think he wanted 75 quid, signed pristine, DAW first, you know, first editions. And she sadly died relatively young and was never fully appreciated. But I didn't want to go down that way. And I've got stuff signed by Tanith. I've got limited editions and stuff. So I thought I'll wait and try and pick up different editions. And I've got at least one of those in the UK Orbit edition, which is quite nice as well. So Tanith Lee. What else do we have? We'll keep with A formats for the time being. And this is something which, I mean, this is a book I've read many times, and it's an old favourite. And it's by one of my favourite living writers, probably my favourite living writer, now that Chris has gone, which is M. John Harrison. And this is The Pastel City. There we go. And that's the NEL edition, New English Library. There we go. And of course, NEL and DAW had a connection because DAW, I think, received some funding or distribution from New American Library, which was related to New English Library. This copy, it says in the back, there's a little card there, which I'm just going to read. And it says, warmly inscribed by the author-editor to renowned fantasy fan and British Fantasy Society member John M. Harvey, UK small press publisher who released many weird fiction anthologies under his Spectre Press imprint. Now, you'll also see here that it says the greatest fantasy novel since Dune. Now, of course, Dune is a science fiction novel. Is The Pastel City a fantasy novel? We'll have a talk about that because this will be upcoming or something. Now, I am a big fan of M. John, obviously, as I say, and I've talked about him a fair whack on the channel. I'm just going to pop it out so we can take a look at it. And the thing is a lot of people read this because this is the first of the full Draconian books. And M. John has a reputation for being strange and spiky and divisive and weird, which is correct because he is, and that's why I love him. But this is probably his most straight-ahead work. Now, Mike himself is not fond of his early books because he hadn't fully found his voice. And what you see in this, in The Committed Men, and in the very early stories, and even in the Centauri device, you know, from the late 60s to the mid-70s, he's very young. He is struggling to create his voice, and I think he does an admirable job. But in the 80s, he explodes and becomes incredible. But I'm very fond of these because the way to read Veraconium is that do read it in sequence, and you have to be ready for things falling apart. But this is a lovely, this is a Pennington, of course, wraparound artwork, beautiful. And I've never owned this edition, and I do love Mike's stuff. And so this is I've now got 3 copies of The Pastel City. I'm just going to have a look. There we are. And that's his characteristic hand, and it says, for John, nice copy. Mike Harrison, 86, which, funnily enough, is that's the year before I met Mike. And I think I met him in 87, and he stayed at my place in 89, and we've been firm chums ever since. So yeah, so really, really nice. I think you'd agree. So that's lovely. But you don't often see an NEL book in that condition, and I thought I've got to have that because, you know, time grows short, and I do love his stuff a lot. So, and I'm eagerly awaiting his next book. But, you know, Mike, he's not prolific. You have to sort of sit back, take a deep breath, reread some of his old stuff, and it'll come through. So we really should pop that in pride of place. So I'm going to rebag that in a moment. I need to bag Tanith up. Where do we stand on bagging? Well, the thing is, these bags, actually, I'm not sure if this will go in here, only work with the very thinnest A formats, and I can tell just at a glance that's not going to, is it going to happen? Yeah, that's going to happen just about. I am getting into bagging more, and I've been toying with it for quite some time, and I know that Jules is getting into bagging more. And the reason I'm doing it, I started bagging some of my hardcovers in one corner of the hideout because it was damp, or the video video insisted it was damp, but we can't get that problem. And it saved things. So people say, oh, you shouldn't bag your books, blah, 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 blah. It's all to do with the room temperature and how tightly you bag. It's all about nuance. You can bag things if you maintain a certain dryness in the room, but you've got to air it as well, have things to suck the moisture out of the air, and really, you know, don't tight bag, leave room for air to get in. Now you will get some books with acid-free paper, they'll fox and what have you, nothing you can do about that, they'll do that in time anyway, so just bag that. But I'm doing it really because with a lot of these books, as you know, a lot of my stuff is in really good nick, and as you get older you drop things, you fumble, and you know, if you have it tightly bagged, you know, you're more protected, so it's more about that really. And it would be nice for me to pass these on to somebody who'd really appreciate them when my time is done, you know, or maybe I'll sell them, we'll see. And I'd like to preserve my reputation as a conditioned man, so that's an important thing. So there you go, M. John, Tanith. Never met Tanith Lee, one of those people who I wouldn't have known what to say to, I think, because she's a very striking woman, very interesting. Probably she's very nice, but there you go. So, the final A format today, and again, a book I mentioned in that video done at Bob's, and this is A Nest of Nightmares by Lisa Tuttle. This is a very, very, very uncommon book indeed. I used to have it, this edition, like a book. I passed it on, and this was an interesting one because this was the only printing this book ever had, and it was hard to find, and it was, you know, classified as horror, and it was a hard sell because it didn't look like your average horror novel, and you know, that's what's great. It's not a novel, it's a collection of short stories. And I remember it was pretty good. I need to reread it because it was a long time ago. This would have been late 80s. But really beautiful. It's had the same jacket art on the more recent edition in the Paperbacks from Hell imprint from Valancourt, except those two, there's another one from her as well. They are not distributed in the UK for copyright reasons. So somebody still owns the copyright for those books, for this one and the other one. I can't think what the other one's called. And he's not distributing them. It's kind of stupid because it'd be nice for people to buy them. You can get all the other paperbacks from Hell. Nobody stocks them much because they're about 12 quid. And a lot of people working in bookshops think, oh, you know, 12 quid is expensive. But I know if you have them, you sell them. It's just one of those things. Whenever we have them where I work, we sell them. So, you know, it's one of those things. And they do lots of interesting stuff. But, you know, they print on demand. It's not entirely, the livery is different, even though the illustration is the same. It is not the same. So I'll be selling my Paperbacks from Hell copy on and hanging on to this. Isn't that lovely? Nest of Nightmares. Fantastic. The funny thing about books is that I'm drawn to books which have covers which are unusual. But a lot of readers are really put off because, you know, they expect things to look a certain way, and I find that very strange. You know, it just shows you that what a lot of people want out of reading is comfort. They want things to look the same. They won't buy a science fiction novel if it doesn't have a spaceship on the cover, and so on. They won't buy a crime novel if it doesn't look cozy. They won't buy things in an unusual format. And, you know, this is the thing. It's a world of goats and sheep, and I'm very much on the side of the goats, I have to say. So I'm drawn to things which look a bit different. And that doesn't mean, publishers, I want you running out and doing things in weird formats that don't fit in bookshelves. Please stick to A and B, because we know where they are. Stick to Octavo, Demi and Royal, because we know where they are. But, you know, think about what can be done with jacket designs. We don't want die cuts, none of that nonsense. So, you know, forget that. But it's that thing. But it's a strange thing, because if you're publishing something which is probably not going to be a massive market success, you may as well go for it and do something unusual, because then you'll get the individuals out there, the people who really want to sort of push the envelope and discover new things. You'll get them pick things up. Anyway, Lisa Tuttle, I've never met, always wanted to, and M. John Harrison. Lisa Tuttle, she was George R. R. Martin's girlfriend, of course. She's from Texas. They wrote Windhaven together. She was married to Christopher Priest. And she's had a long career of writing short stories, novels. She's very good, actually. I really recommend her stuff. So pick it up. And we've got one more paperback from somebody, again, I've talked about recently in the Faber Mafia video. Now, I got this from Cold Tonnage from Andy. And later in the year, I'll be going to see Andy and doing a video with him. And this is Chimeras by Christopher Evans. Now, there's a sticker there, which is 20. This wasn't 20 quid. It was a lot less than that. And Chimeras came out in the early 90s. And it's from the period where I was really getting fed up with SF. And I effectively stopped buying it, apart from a handful of writers. And I kept looking at this in work and thinking, do I want it? It's Christopher Evans, you know, he's good. But I'm fed up with science fiction, you know, am I going to go for it? And I decided not to. And this is interesting because this is a B format, as you see. Note the difference in size, A format and B format. And yet, this is HarperCollins, but it's not a Paladin. So we should have Paladin. It's actually Grafton, which is really, really weird because Grafton was still mostly A format mass market paperbacks then. So it's an odd one. And there's a signature inside. And let's see. Now, Andy tells me that's John Clute's signature. Now, I do have things, as John Clute the critic, I do have things signed by Christopher Evans. Now, I need to have a look, and I don't know, I'm confused by that. That looks like, yeah, that looks like Chris's signature to me, but there we are. But the whole idea of Chimera is that this is about a alternate sort of world, or our world, but with a difference. There are some people who have this amazing artistic gift where they can conjure up a work of art from empty space, and it's about what happens with these people, and it's about the greatest of all these artists. And I've never read it. It's very slim, which does attract me to it, and he is good. And there's a couple I haven't read by him which I need to catch up. Very spotty career. He's, again, lots of pseudonyms and things, but I think there's only about 6 novels under his own name. And he had a bit of a renaissance in the 90s when I wasn't sort of very active reading SF. So I'm looking again, but very beautiful, I think you'd agree. And if you want another copy, I know Andy's got one, it's about 10 quid, and that one is supposedly signed by Chris. But it's a lovely little book anyway. So I'll leave that there for you to feast your eyes upon. Then we get into a few hardcovers just to sort of round this off. And let's see what we have. Now, somebody who I find sometimes very frustrating, sometimes very lively, and he sort of splashes the bucket of water in your face, is Ian Watson. And this is Chekhov's Journey. Now, Chekhov's Journey, Gollanc's Yellow Jacket, which some of you loathe, I know, but I love them, so I don't care. I've never read this one. This isn't a book of his which is massively highly rated, but I don't care about that. It depends on whether I like it. And fundamentally, it says the famous Tunguska explosion, which occurred in 1908. You know about Tunguska, the comet debris or meteorite. Some say it was a UFO that come down and completely destroyed a Siberian forest. You haven't heard about that? Look it up, Tunguska, very interesting. And people wondered about it for years and years and years. It says, so Tunguska in 1908, how did Anton Chekhov know of it in 1890, 18 years before? So there you go. So this is going to be a 40-in sort of story, strange phenomena. And Chekhov, of course, the great Russian short story writer. So that's going to be interesting. Ian is always interesting, even when his books drive me nuts, because he piles on idea after idea. And I like ideas. And, you know, the SF is the novel of ideas. It's one of the most important things in terms of the novel of ideas. You know, he sometimes, for me, goes too far and sometimes stretches a point. And it almost seems sometimes a novelty for novelty's sake. But you can't, you know, he's such an original thinker. You can't argue with that. And he writes really beautifully as well. So at some point we'll have to do an overview because he's very spiky. You know, he upsets the apple cart. You know, it's what you want. There's nobody really like him these days. I would say probably the closest person to Ian these days may well be Adam Roberts, who I'm very enamoured of. I don't think there's anybody else quite there, because Adam is kind of unique. You know, we'll talk about Adam again soon, because I've been reading some more of his work recently and I'm a huge fan. And he's probably the closest you would get to Ian Watson. And I'm sure Adam would see that as a plus, really. So, and I hope that Ian would as well. It's great stuff. And I got that from Psychobabel and Scoob Books on ABU. It's really good prices, very nice people. And lots of great SF actually, so I really like them. I've bought a few things from them, they're good. Right, so what do we have? 2 more hardcovers. Christopher Evans again, and this is Aztec Century. Look at that. This is a hard one to find. And interestingly enough, I mentioned this in a video recently and said, oh, I can't find one of those. And John from Sci-Fi Scavenger said, oh, funnily enough, Steve, I picked one up today. And as it happened, I bought this on the same day as John bought his. And I think he got his for about 4 quid in a charity shop. And I'm sure he'll show it in his channel. Mine I got on eBay for £8. It's a bit sort of, the paper's gone a little bit toned, but we can cope with that. And this is an alternate history where I think Cortez changed sides in the conquest of the Americas and joined the Aztecs, and the Aztecs, you know, become this big empire. A highly unlikely concept, but it might be good fun. And as an alternate history, that's quite unique. Christopher's a good writer, as I say. Now, something about Christopher Evans I need to say. I have mentioned it, I think, in comments, but there's another Christopher Evans associated with New Wave SF and just post New Wave SF, and that's Dr. Christopher Evans. They're not the same person, okay? Dr. Christopher Evans, it always says on the book covers, Dr. Christopher Evans. Now, in some bibliographies, like Fantastic Fiction, the two are confused and they've got them tied up. So never assume that an author's name is unique. You can't copyright a name, okay? So if you're writing and you're going to use your own name or whatever name you use, Google it and see how common it is, and you know, put some signifier in, change it, do what CJ Cherry did, put an H on the end, do what I did, put your initial in the middle so it can be distinguished, because you have trouble. People will not be able to search you accurately unless you differentiate yourself. It's really important. Books, science fiction, all of it, it's about words and it's about being specific. So there you go. So Dr. Christopher Evans is not Christopher Evans. To digress a bit further on that, Dr. Christopher Evans was a friend of J.G. Ballard's, and he did lots of anthology editing. Mind in Chains is a good one. He wrote non-fiction books, used to appear on the TV, and he is the hoodlum scientist in J.G. Ballard's Crash. Vaughan in Crash is based loosely on Christopher Evans. So there you go, at least it's the inspiration. But it's not this Chris Evans, who is Welsh, scientist, school teacher, educator, all-round good guy. So there we go. So I'm really pleased to get that. So that, I think, completes my collection of Christopher Evans novels under his own name. There's lots of others. So I'm just going to flick through them now and talk through them, a few brief bibliography. So there's Capella's Golden Eyes and The Insider, which I showed in the Faber Mafia video. There's, I haven't got In Limbo. I've just realised there's In Limbo and I haven't got that. I'd forgotten that one. Never mind, I have to pick that up. Chimeras, Aztec Century. There's the nanotechnology one, which comes after this. Mortal Remains, I think it is. That's bugging me now. And of course, there's Amiga, which has never had a mass market paperback release. So there's, let's have a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think. So there you go. I'd forgotten In Limbo. I've read that as well. Why haven't I got that? Old and In the Way. So there we are. Isn't that nice? Finally, I showed you earlier on Gary Kilworth's Hunter's Moon, A Story of Foxes. I haven't really showed it to you. Let me just stick that there. And this was the book Gary was promoting when he came to the shop I worked in and did an event way back in 1989, him and M. John. And Gary was experimenting in that, but he'd done a lot of SF. He does some great mainstream novels, which I refer to in my top 15 associational SF novels. And this was his first anthropomorphic, and it's really good and very beautiful. As you see, Unwin Hyman, lovely. The Unwin Hyman rep, Jim, lived next door to me. And his brother, Bob, who was the rep for Cambridge University Press, moved in after Jim moved out. And it's got lots of free books from Jim. And when we did the event, Gary stayed Jim, and M. John Harrison, who was doing the event with Gary, stayed with me and the Video Widow, and also M. John's then partner, Jane Johnson, who is George R. Martin's editor. They stayed with us as well. And what larks we had, what fun we had. Those were the days. So that's Hunter's Moon. And Gary then went on to do this book, which I never picked up, never read. And I thought I'd get it because it was on eBay and it was cheap and it's very pretty. And this is, I should say, Frost Dancers, which is an anthropomorphic fantasy novel about hares. And I haven't read it. I read a little bit of it yesterday, and just to get a feel for it. And I learned a lot about hares, and I'm pretty good on natural history, but I discovered there were two types of hare in the UK, and that rabbits were only introduced into the UK in Norman times. And it's about this hare, which now, of course, you know, there's Watership Down, which is rabbit. And it's about this hare who is transported from his ancestral home, and he ends up in an area where there's a lot of hunting and a harpy eagle is on the loose. So that'll be quite interesting. It's quite a chunky one, but very pretty book, I think you'll agree. And this is HarperCollins. Lovely. So that's that little haul there. Will there be more? You know, I keep saying there'll be fewer book hauls on the channel because I'm trying to cut back, but we'll have to see. But the next few videos which will be coming up will be, you know, going back to more thematic things, looking at specific books, specific authors and themes. It's just I've got to shake off this dreadful cold and get my life organized, you know, which is always harder than it should be. Hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you again soon. Like, subscribe, comments, and super thanks to those of you who super thank it makes such a big difference to the survival of this channel, because, you know, the channel is surviving despite my inability to survive at the moment. So I'll see you soon. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great time. Bye for now.